Good day, great people. My name is Mr. Steve. Today we are going to discuss about health beliefs and behaviors in health psychology. All right. Before we go further, we want also to look at main objectives that one needs to look at when we are going through this lesson. Firstly, the aim is to provide an overview of psychological determinants of health-related behaviors and beliefs, as well as objectives. Other main objectives is for the student should be able to provide a basic description of meaning of health-related behaviors and provide examples of different types of health behavior, as well as psychological processes that influence health behaviors. Again, common psychological components of health behavior theories. So that's some of those aspects that one is to look at. So looking at this dual pathway of psychology and health, which try to show the pathway or the link between the two aspects. For instance, psychological factors, then healthy behavior, then as well as physical health. So the direct path is what psychological processes that transmit influence along this path. So you can see the indirect path as well as what the direct path. So the healthy behavior will influence physical health as well as what psychological health. Now, looking into this detail, like psychological factors involved in appraisal, then chronic stress and negative affect. So these are the psychological factors that are transmitted in between, then cause a physiological reaction, and then goes in direct from the health behavior, which influences, then psychological, which involved in appraisal, then they directly influence the healthy behavior, as you can see with a thick line. So this is trying to fill in information. So it starts with from which stable factors and what else, as well as stable individual differences as well. Now, trying to redefine behavior. Behavior are the actions or reactions of an individual to a situation. One can as well as can be conscious or unconscious, voluntary or involuntary. So, for instance, healthy behavior, as well as illness behavior, adaptive behavior, then goes to maladaptive behavior, then prevention behavior, then as well as what? Detection behavior. So healthy behavior that may implicate what? To health. So looking at determinants of healthy behavior, background factors, which are now the characteristics that define the context in which people live their life, shared understanding, and the ways of knowing the world, isn't it? So that is the framework that one may look into. Then look into stable factors, individual differences like personality in psychological activities that are stable over time and context. Also looking at social factors, social connections in the immediate environment, mostly stable but can be fragile. For instance, when in conflict with our background factors. So social factors that are connects in the immediate environment, and then situational factors like appraisal of personal relevance that shape responses in specific situations. So why a framework? Background factors, stable factors, social factors, and then situational factors. So different intervention targets require different intervention strategies. As you can look at these effects, or these are factors that really influence a behavior. So that really guides a framework or a model. So that is the situation. So looking at stable factors like individual differences, like what we referred previously, variations between people in psychology activities within people that produce responses that are stable over time. All right, let's look at this. All right, as we continue, some of the stable factors, like how we explained probably. So influence appraisal in three ways. Like they determine if or to what extent an event is silent, how sensitive someone towards particular certain events, or also they provide a generalized framework for understanding and evaluating the event, uh, for instance, a threat or a challenge, as well as they make available or suggest potential responses, for instance, initial response options. So, looking at individual differences in health, the three broad types of individual differences that are looked into: emotional dispositions, generalized expectations, and then explanatory styles. Then comes to temporary dimensions. Three broad types of individual difference, like emotional disposition, the first one, which are psychological processes which involve both the experience and then the expression. How one experience, like how you interpret the experience. So that's both the experience as well as the expression. Then the generalized expectancies, which are now the psychological processes which involves formulating expectations in relation to future outcomes. After that, then psychological processes are involved in explaining the causes of negative events. So those are some of the three types of individual differences that people do carry. So emotional dispositions, like for instance, negative affect tendency towards the experience of negative affective state, like for instance, towards the experiences of negative affective states, like towards the experience of hostility, depression, anxiety as well. And then appraisal biases for heightened arousal and increased frequency, where one tend to, let's say, over experience or over perceive or inflate influences when it comes to perceived certain events. Then looking at emotional expression, like the low expression of negative emotion experience, both unconscious repression and conscious suppression. So the low expression towards the negative emotional experience, that is now the unconscious repression plus conscious suppression. Unconsciously you want to experience, but consciously you're suppressing the experience. So looking at generalized expectancies, like locus of control, where expectancies that, where expectations that future outcomes will be determined by factors that are either internal, which now rallies with the person, which has self, and then external, which is now the influence from other people or other things in terms of the environment. So internal loci, which is now associated with favorable outcomes and the performance of healthy behaviors, but very dependent on situational factors. That you may have your own self, but very much depending on how these situational factors are presenting themselves towards one, for one person to perform or to have positive healthy behaviors. Looking at self-efficacy, which is now the belief that one is the ability to organize and execute a course of action and the expectation that that action will result in or lead to a desired outcome. That self-efficacy of like, as you expect that you have the ability, and that ability now or that expectation also will look into the results or the actions that you are going to do will also give you a result in such a result like this that you're expecting. Heuristic belief, wherein the beneficial effects of high self-efficacy deriving from appraisal bias for challenge rather than threat and expectation of success. Rather than looking at threat and expectation of success, some they experience appraisal bias in which they look into the challenge, where they want to challenge the activity or the event towards their abilities so that they come out with the result rather than looking at the outcomes per se, if we may say. Then comes to the exploratory styles, which are more like optimism and then attributional styles. Optimism, pessimism, those expectations of positive future outcome are however achieved despite current negative outcomes, where one is expecting positive despite of what negative is happening. And also attributional style, looking at the effects, causal explanation of negative events as external, and then stable in terms of time, and then global in terms of situation. So when one point at negative events, either towards themselves, either towards time, that is the wrong timing, or towards just the times that they are in, or towards just the global situation. Yeah, just because some things that are not specified towards individuals. So social cognitive theories that also look into this aspect are, for instance, a healthy belief model by Rosenstock, 1966, protective motivational theory by Rogers, 1975, and then another theory, which is quite famous, theory of reasoned action by Fishbein and Asian, 1975, and then theory of planned behavior by Asen, 1988. And then comes trans-theoretical model by Prochaska and De Clemente, 1983. Forgive me for my pronunciation. Now, looking into these effects, for instance, of belief model. All right. Apologies. Okay, by Rosenstock, 1966. This one, the health behavior, which starts from what? Perceived threat as well as perceived efficacy, then comes to perceived susceptibility, and then perceived severity, and then comes to efficacy, perceived benefits, perceived barriers. When it comes to threat, how one can sustain to it, or how one can be sincere with it, how you can survive it. That is perceived threat of one doing a healthy behavior, as well as coming to perceived efficacy, looking at your ability or benefits of doing that, as well as barriers which are stopping you to achieve the desired outcome. Then comes to the theory of planned behavior, looking at it, coming from the behavior, then comes to behavior intention. So behavior intention is coming into three aspects: behavioral attitude, then subjective norm, then comes to perceived behavioral control. Coming from perceived behavioral control, which influences also behavioral intention, are now under like control beliefs as well as self-ability or efficacy. Now comes to subjective norms like normative beliefs as well as motivation to comply. Now looking at you, your culture, your norms, and how you were brought up, and then comes to behavioral attitudes, which is now the behavioral beliefs as well as the outcome evaluation, the cost benefit analysis. Those are some of those aspects which also influence your behavioral intention for you to behave in a way which is healthy, promoting. So that's why it's called the theory of what? A planned behavior, that one has to look into those aspects before they do their behavior. So when you create a framework, you have to look into this aspect, that how you can apply to people's behaviors and then portray what they want in terms of outcome and evaluation, as well as into things that motivate them and things that they believe in, as well as how they assume the control belief, how one controls him or herself, as well as portray their abilities that they can achieve. So any other question is going to be sent through the comment section or through the discussion forum that we have. Now, I'm leaving this trans-theoretical model that one can define or one can explain to us, or one can write within, and then we share and see how others will appreciate. You have a wonderful day.